be running over the next fortnight, I suppose. And if you like what you experience here, then please do tell others about Aim High, and please join us again for the next parts coming up. The brilliant Sam Lee is joining us tomorrow at the same time. So feel free to ask questions as we go whenever you would like to. There is no such thing as a stupid question here. And please never feel that your question will be distracting either. We are used to selecting questions from a torrent as we go when we have hundreds or thousands of people on these things, so just throw them all in. Any questions that we miss, we'll be happy to come back to at the end, so please also feel free to respond to one another's comments and questions as we go along if you'd like to. Please check that your chat is working now by typing your favourite citrus fruit into the chat thread now. Oh, hello, welcome. Kiwi, Satsuma, great citrus, great choices. Grapefruit is my personal favourite. Clementine's also good, although I prefer a Satsuma. Yes, okay, thanks all. As one person is saying that you can't hear me, the sound is definitely coming through, so it must be a sound problem on your end. Try reloading and hopefully you'll get some sound. Okay, so let's begin. Today we have a very special guest joining us. Jojo Mehta is one of the most immediately likable people I've ever met. A linguist, an anthropologist, entrepreneur and environmentalist, she studied both in Oxford and London and has the brilliant intelligence and wit that could probably allow her to do anything she wanted in life. And what she has decided to do, in my eyes, makes her nothing less than a global hero. She is the co-founder of the Stop Ecocide campaign alongside the late, great Polly Higgins. And this campaign is working to drastically change the global rules for all of our sakes, present and future. So please welcome Jojo. Hello, Jojo. You're on. Ooh, and we were having some internet troubles with Jojo to begin with. Oh, you are here. Jojo, I think maybe you are going to have to disable your video if we're going to be able to hear you, which is such a shame, but it's already not working.
Okay, I'll tell you what, before I do that,
yeah,
I'm just going to give everybody a big wave. Hello, this is me. And now I'm afraid I'm going to have to turn my video off because otherwise you're not going to get my voice quickly enough. Okay, it's been lovely to meet you briefly, and I'm going to carry on speaking in just a minute.
We'll try that. Maybe every now and then you could randomly turn your video on.
Is that coming through okay, Matthew?
Oh, that's coming through great, yeah. Maybe every now and then you could randomly turn your video on to give people a wave, because that'd be fun.
Sure, if that works.
Okay, so I'm going to dive straight in with the reality. So,
okie dokie, let's go this way then.
Nature is sending us a very clear message. Our food, oxygen, health, and future of all the life on Earth are hanging precariously in the balance as it slides into accelerating decline, and species are going extinct 1,000 times faster than normal. Almost 70% of the wildlife on land has been wiped out in the last 50 years, and the terrifying stats go on. So, firstly, let me ask you, what is ecocide?
Ecocide is the mass damage and destruction of ecosystems. And as a word, you can kind of recognize its meaning from its parts. So ecocide is destruction of ecosystems in the same way as homicide is killing a person, or genocide, destroying a people. So ecocide is destroying ecosystems. And we see this as the root cause of the biodiversity loss and extinction crisis, which are symptoms of the fact that for decades, some of the biggest corporations of ecosystems around the world.
Okay, I've been showing everyone some images there of ecocide as well, so that people can see the kind of what's going on here. Now, I'm wondering from people in the audience, who had heard of this idea before? Who had heard of what ecocide is prior to this? And while we're waiting for answers, Jojo, could you tell us about the importance of language in this? Like, why is it so important that we have a word for this?
It recognises that there are serious levels of damage happening in different aspects of the life support systems on this earth, so that there's serious deforestation, that overfishing is trashing the sea floor, that excessive air pollution is damaging climate. And so they're in these different arenas, but it's all excessive damage, if you like. So having a word or concept that brings all those things together, and it enables people to understand that all of this is serious ecosystem destruction, is actually really useful in terms of being able to prevent that destruction in the future, because you're able to bring that concept together as ecocide, which literally means destroying one's home, by the way, and the earth is our common home. Having that concept to bring it together, it's interesting that when people sort of grasp that concept, at the very same moment they also understand that it's wrong and should be stopped. So there's this kind of, already kind of an inbuilt sense that this is something that's wrong, and that it's natural that we should actually make it illegal.
Yes, I totally agree. It's kind of like the opposite, isn't it, of George Orwell's book 1984, where words are removed, like the concept of freedom is removed from the language, I think, is it? And so that people don't know what freedom is anymore. I always think one of the greatest things you can do in the world is to create a new word and create understanding of a new concept. So even that alone is an incredible feat to have been involved in. Anyway, so how do the rules work at the moment? What's going on now?
And there are some environmental crimes, very specific ones, like certain kinds of poisoning of water or such like. But most environmental laws are in the regulatory sphere. And that means that they're civil regulations. So you can't do this. I mean, you can't go to a government, for example, and ask for a permit to, kill a few hundred people in order to start your next business. Obviously, you can't do that, because killing people is a crime. You can request a permit for opening a mine or a permit for drilling for oil. These things are licensed. In other words, the current situation is that the activities that cause this drastic level of destruction are currently, not only are they permitted, but you can actually, they're actually licensed, they're actually ultimately sort of supported by the current system. And what that means is that it's clearly time to change the rule.
And so right now, there's no rule anywhere like this to stop these kinds of crimes, or do rules like this exist?
There are a few countries in the world that criminalise ecocide and describe it as serious, but there's only very few countries that have it in their criminal codes, and they haven't been heavily enforced.
I see. Okay.
So what level? So that there's a rule that can go right across borders, and you actually start to change, attitudes globally at that stage.
So why do you think the rules are like this? I'm also interested to know, like, people who are here as watching and learning and listening to Jojo now. Why do you think the rules are as they are? Why do we not have rules for protecting nature already? Also, Jojo, what do you think?
Okay, regulations to protect nature, but the primary issue here is how we conceive of nature. So the kind of dominant Western paradigm, man and nature are very separate, and man dominates, and it has tended historically to be mankind. Dominating nature, and that goes way back. I mean, that sort of sense of separation from nature goes way back in Western culture to say Plato, who the split between the ideal and the real, and that kind of segues into the whole the dominance of the Catholic church, where it's spiritual versus physical, and that just goes straight onto the Enlightenment thinking, where you've got rational versus natural / emotional. It's the rational, it's the spirit, it's the ideal that is seen as superior, and there's this kind of very deeply embedded sense in the kind of dominant Western paradigm that we are here to make use of nature, that nature is here for our profit, for our extraction, for our, we can dominate it. And so that kind of fundamental cultural understanding, which is not shared by everybody in the world, but it certainly is the dominant form of the Western dominant form of thinking, grown up around that, or out of that, more precisely property. And so we really need to look to alternative ways of looking at nature. For example, the indigenous worldviews, where there's a really profound understanding about that, is actually that's the reality. We are deeply intertwined. We're completely interdependent. We completely depend on for our air that we breathe, for our water, and so to sort of separate ourselves from that, and therefore separate ourselves from what we're doing to nature is becoming. It's almost becoming a flat Earth position to maintain. I mean, it doesn't correspond to the reality.
Okay, I think Jojo, you're sharing a lot of really incredible wisdom with people, and I really want people to be able to hear it. But we're getting a few people complaining on the live stream about how difficult it is to hear because your voice keeps coming and going. And so I wonder if maybe rather than us kind of going through this and us kind of missing or not getting the full impact of the incredible things that you have to share with us, perhaps we should rerun this at another time. What do those who are watching and listening think? Yeah, because it's a shame you can't see Jojo as well. Yeah, this seems to be nice to see you. I think this it would be a real shame to stop this during, but I kind of think maybe better to do it at a time when we have like a really good internet connection so that we can have Jojo fully. So Jojo, how would you feel about that? I'm really sorry to potentially cut you off at this point and rerun later.
No, I think it's best to do what's going to actually convey the information in the best way. So I'm really sorry. I'm living in rural Gloucestershire and we don't have a great connection here. So I'm going to see whether I can work out another way to be able to, get this information to you and have another conversation with Matthew another time, if that is for the best.
We're also getting a lot of people saying, no, please, we want Jojo to stay, even if it's glitchy, which is great. We can try carrying on, and it is actually nice to see you now, Jojo. Maybe let's have a go at carrying on, shall we? Because we've got your time now. Okay, press on, folk. We're getting different kind of votes of what people want. Okay, people seem excited about the idea that we might carry on. So should we carry on instead?
Okay.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, great. Right. Sorry to change. Okay, so what's the difference between criminal law and civil law? Because you're proposing that ecocide should be a criminal law. Why?
Well, with civil litigation or with civil law, you're looking at when you want to take a company to task for it's literally you against the company, or potentially a community against a company, and that's very expensive. It's difficult to do, and companies tend to simply budget for it. So they will work around regulations as much as they can. And if they do have to go to court, they see this as a sort of cost of doing business. Now, that's very different to if you put in place a criminal law, because with a criminal law, it's individual people who become held responsible for damage. So they can't hide behind a sort of corporate veil. Effectively, if you're a CEO or you're a head of operations that has made a decision to engage in a particular activity that has created mass destruction, that means it is you personally who will be held criminally liable, and therefore potentially you could end up behind bars. And the way that that is viewed from the perspective of corporate actors is very, very side at the international level, alongside war crimes and genocide and crimes against humanity. Now, CEOs don't want to be seen as in a similar bracket to a war criminal. I mean, it really doesn't do much for your share price. For CEOs, it's very important how they're viewed because it directly affects investor and public confidence. So criminalizing major destruction to nature has the potential to be a much more effective deterrent than simply strengthening regulation, as you might be doing in the civil arena.
It's actually kind of insane, that, isn't it? The idea that companies literally just budget for civil litigation, and it's just things part of doing business, and they just get on with it. You've probably seen this image before, where it says "friendly reminder: legality isn't a guide to morality." Do you know the one that I mean? I'm just gonna show that quickly and ask people who are watching to imagine, like, close your eyes for a moment and imagine being alive in the midst of segregation or genocides or slavery, and ask yourself, like, would you have stood up to fight them yourself? I mean, it can be really terrifying to go against these forces that keep these things happening, like slavery and segregation. And this is the things that Jojo and her team are doing, which is why they're global heroes, in my opinion. Anyway, yes. So you were talking about CEOs and bankers and insurers and so on, and how they don't want to be in the docks next to a war criminal that a war criminal has been in. What do you think about the idea of willful blindness of these people to the idea of the fact that they're destroying nature?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an interesting discussion, because what it touches on is, usually with criminality, you look for intent. So there are different sort of levels of criminality according to the intention of the person who's committed the act. And of course, if you're going to, genocide's an example at the international level. You have to prove genocide, you have to show that somebody actually intends to destroy people in whole or in part. Now, of course, with ecocide and the destruction of ecosystems, you're not usually looking at somebody having the ultimate aim of destroying the ecosystem. They normally have the ultimate aim of making money, and the ecosystem destruction is the collateral damage along the way. It would be approached slightly differently with ecocide, because there is a level of intent, because obviously the act that is taking place is conscious. So it's conscious destruction, if you like, of, let's say, conscious deforestation, for example. But effectively, it would come more under the sort of description of something like recklessness. In other words, you knew what was going to happen, you knew the risks, and you still committed that particular act. So but it also comes back to the important thing that, if something's a crime, you can't actually legally finance it, and you can't legally insure it, and you can't legally give a permit for it. So it does, it does take, it sort of puts those activities into a whole different category.
Yes, I hope people are starting to see the same thing. I know that it hits different people at different speeds, but the incredible power of this could be so powerful in terms of its ability to change the world. I just want to very quickly respond to some comments. Jane, I know it can be a struggle to follow because of the glitchiness. Jojo, we did a few tests with Jojo, and her internet was fine, but she's in rural Gloucestershire, running the whole of this world-changing campaign from there, and it seems like everyone locally has come home and started using their internet, and so the internet connection is much slower than when we did our tests, which is a shame, but we're hoping that you can still follow, and maybe we'll be able to put out some information about this afterwards, or distribute some more information for people. And Jess, good suggestion about potentially releasing some kind of transcript. We'll do like a recording, and we'll try to edit it down into the punchiest bits to help people to get the key ideas. But yeah, so apologies for the internet shakiness on Jojo's end. It's not at all her fault, and we thought we were prepared for this. But anyway, right, another question. By the way, we will very soon come to open questions, and if you've got any now, then start putting them in. But we'll move to those at the end. But I'm just going to keep asking Jojo a few questions to get the whole of Ecocide, and then we'll move to those. So. Why? Yes, the International Criminal Court. You've talked about why it's so important for it to be a criminal offence and internationally. Will it work? Is the process highly complex? And what kind of challenges are there ahead?
So it's worth knowing why it's important to go for the International Criminal Court, which is the route that we're aiming to take. And that is because the ICC is the only global mechanism that directly accesses the criminal justice systems of all its member states. So if you criminalise something at the International Criminal Court, any country that ratifies it must incorporate it in the same form into their own criminal legislation. And so if you want to create a map that will be the same in lots of different jurisdictions, then it's the most efficient way to do it. And it's also very important in this particular context because the worst polluters and the worst perpetrators of ecosystem destruction are multinational companies, and therefore they operate in lots of different jurisdictions. So to have a coherence across those different national legal systems is actually quite important. And the sort of method for it, or the process of it, it's not instant by any means, but it's also not complex. So it would involve simply one member state or a group of member states, which is what we're working towards, proposing an amendment to the Rome Statute, which is the governing document for the International Criminal Court, for the ICC. And then you need at least half of the people attending the next annual meeting of the member states to agree to discuss it. In other words, to agree to put it on the table. So that second stage is kind of an admissibility stage, if you like. After that, you would enter into a stage where you want to end up with the adoption of the crime. And that's probably the lengthiest part, when the different state representatives would potentially be negotiating the exact wording. And then once you've got 2/3 of member states agreeing to it, it's having an existing international crime. It's there in the statute. And then the final stage is for the member states to ratify, which they can do at whatever point they wish, but usually once a crime is afterwards, much as the Paris Agreement worked. So this document to include crimes of aggression, and that took 7 years to go through. We think that Ecocide is likely to go faster because in the current climate, both literally and politically, we don't believe there are many countries that will want to be seen to be obstructing this. In other words, I can't think of many countries that would actively want to be seen saying, no, we don't want to discuss this. It's clearly an absolutely global pressing issue, and we believe that will help a lot in terms of moving this forward. And although 3 to 5 years sounds like a really long time, in terms of changing adding a crime to international law, it's really quite fast. I mean, if you think about the fact that, from start to finish, I guess the Paris Agreement took 20 years plus to negotiate and put in place. If this can be done in 5 years, it's going to be really quite swift.
Yeah, that would be lightning. And it really needs to be done that fast. And I just want to kind of remind people that this isn't like I don't know, sometimes when we have these kind of conversations, we're talking about things that have happened in the past and we're telling stories, but Jojo is right on the front line of this at the moment. And so you're about to start running these side events for the ICC this week, right? And this is all going on around this, and like Jojo's been incredibly generous with her time, actually coming on to this, considering the very important things that are going on in the Stop Ecocide campaign right now. So do you want to tell us like how's the campaign going? Like what's with these side events, and also what was with so I know Macron made a big promise, and what's happened with that?
Okay, so we've seen a huge acceleration in interest in the concept of ecocide and the possibility of criminalising it. And the main forum, obviously, as you'll know from what I've said so far, the main forum for doing that is the International Criminal Court. And this week and next week are actually the key moments of this is the key moment of the year there, where the Assembly of States Parties convenes. And this year it's been a little bit sort of disorganized because of the COVID situation, and it's happening partly in The Hague and partly in New York at the UN. And the side events, so the kind of NGO and state organised events that happen alongside the sort of core state business, are actually happening online this year, unsurprisingly, as much else is. And we're actually co-hosting 2 side events related to Ecocide tomorrow and Friday. And tomorrow's one is about the impacts on Indigenous communities of ecosystem destruction. So that's obviously very obviously closely related. And we've got a wonderful speaker, Nina Gualinga from the Sarayaku people in Ecuador, is going to be headlining that event. And then on Friday, we have got an event that's actually state hosted, which is wonderful because it means that it's in the official ICC program. And that's hosted by Vanuatu. And Vanuatu is one of the most climate vulnerable states in the world, in the Pacific, a small island state. And they were the first, this time last year, they were the first, along with the Maldives, to publicly call for considering the amendment of ecocide into the Rome Statute. So they're very much at the forefront of this, and we've been working with them for some years. So they're going to be co-hosting this event. And that'll be on Friday morning, UK time. It's noon in The Hague. And if you go to our social media, so if you look up at Ecocide Law, either on Insta or Twitter or Facebook, you will find the details of those webinars, those side events, so you can actually register for them at that forum at this time, because it is actually actively moving forward the conversation at the political level internationally, and explain, as well as legal people and press people who will be attending those events, what the implications of ecocide as an international crime are, what the history of it is, and why it's important right now. So this is very much this is literally a change, if you like, or a campaign that is sort of unfolding in front of our very eyes. So we definitely welcome you to join those. And just briefly about the current political developments. Obviously, I've just mentioned Vanuatu and the Maldives calling out for this last year at the International Criminal Court. That put the conversation onto the international state level at an international forum such as the ICC, and a forum like that at sort of UN ecocide for nearly 50 years. So not since 1972, when the head of the then Premier of Sweden, Olof Palme, talked about it. So it's kind of that was a mere 2 years after the word had been coined. So the word, coming back to the word, is again quite new. It's only been around. So that was last year, and then this year we've had support from active support from 2 further states, European states, France and Belgium. France has been very interesting because President Macron was the first head of state to use the word ecocide to describe the Amazon rainforest destruction. He did that last year. And twice in the French government it was brought up, and twice rejected. And actually what Macron said was, this is an international climate assembly in France, which was convened by Macron and his party, convened by the French government, in order to ask for the citizens to come up with climate policies. Their foremost policy that they wanted was actually to criminalise ecocide, which put Macron in an interesting position. And he basically said, we'll look at this for French legislation, but the real battle is at the international level. And he actively stated this, another big sort of jump, if you like, in the visibility of the campaign. And at the beginning of October, the new Belgian government, which took quite a long time to form itself, it's a coalition of 7 parties, also included taking diplomatic action to halt ecocide crime as part of its government pledges. So there are now 4 countries worldwide who have actually specifically stated, made statements in support of criminalising ecocide at the international level. And just recently in France, the government has created what it's calling a crime of ecocide in France, but actually the definition that they're using is really quite watered down compared to what the Citizens' Assembly asked for and what we're aiming for at the international level. And there's a particular political reason for this, or at least we would speculate that there is, which is that single nations or sort of jurisdictions on their own are quite nervous about legislating for ecocide because, they almost certainly because of existing economic relationships that they're concerned about damaging, or existing contracts, or having to sort of put themselves out on a limb in the international community, being the first one, for example, to move forward with this in a public way. And so it's actually safer for governments to support it at the international level. It's a safer political move. They can look good without having to change laws instantly. But at the same, we want the international community to move together so that we can actually create a level of coherence. What we don't want is, some of which might be a bit lame, like the one that France has come up with. And don't get me wrong, it's great that they want to punish ecocide, or they want to punish effectively serious pollution crimes. That's great. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we sort of keep our eye on the main prize, which is that the really major level of destruction that's happening at the global level needs to be named and it needs to be stopped. So it's interesting. France is almost like a pilot scheme for for how this could play out in other jurisdictions, and it's becoming clear that support at the international level is actually the way forward.
So what we have to do is continue to push it at the international level, because just to very quickly re-summarize for anyone who missed out in the small glitches that happened there, it has to be pushed to the international level because countries are scared of doing it by themselves because they might go on a limb. Sorry, you put it far more eloquently than me, but I just wanted to quickly re-summarize for anyone who missed bits. How can we help? And also, I'm interested, those who are on the live stream on Aim High, how can we help? Like, send in your ideas. What are the ideas that you have in terms of how pressure could be put on to make this move faster? But also, Jojo, what are the main things that we can do to help?
So first and foremost, of course, we would encourage anyone and everyone to go to our website, stopecocide.earth, and to sign the international petition that's there. It's a little bit different to a normal petition in the sense that usually a petition has a deadline for a very specific aim. What we've got is actually a kind of rolling accumulation of support, which is what we want to be able to make visible. So please do sign that, and you can then go on to sort of, if you like, become a sort of paid up member of the campaign, which we call these people Earth Protectors. So if you feel like an Earth Protector, you carry on and sign up as an Earth Protector as well. But that's just a part of the story. Really, the key thing with all of this, and this is something that we're discovering really strongly over the last few months, is that this is all about storytelling, I would almost say, narrative. It's about bringing the language, bringing the word into prominence, and that happens through the conversations that you have. So the most powerful thing that you can do is to use the word ecocide to describe major destruction of nature and of ecosystems, and to talk about it in your networks. And for example, I mean, you may have a favorite blog that you follow. You may write a blog yourself. You may have particular publications that you follow online or that you buy. There may be particular sort of information outlets for your particular area of interest, and bringing this conversation into all of those arenas is going to really quite concretely help. And we know that this is true because as we've expanded our campaign, and we now have campaigns in half a dozen countries, we have websites in half a dozen languages, and they're expanding fast. We've literally just launched Italian, German and Portuguese websites in the last few weeks. Where we've got these kind of on-the-ground campaigns, if you like, we're finding that the political traction also follows. So it actually makes a huge difference at the grassroots level and, at the level of educational institutions, NGOs, interest groups, activist groups, all of these kinds of arenas. If we're using the word ecocide and we're saying this is ecocide, this should be a crime, this is something that will then come through to the government as pressure. And where we're seeing the changes at government level, it is actually happening from grassroots pressure. It's not happening from businesses or corporations. That said, we also think that there are plenty of sustainability leaders in the corporate world who would love to see this in place, because if it was in place, it would level the playing field for those people that are doing the right thing. So that's a whole nother arena. But yes, the conversation, we would say, is the most powerful thing that you can do. And please do obviously sign up to our campaign as well.
Yeah, this is an amazing concept, isn't it? The idea that that actually a lot of these companies that we often think of as being the big perpetrators and the really evil ones actually really want this kind of legislation to happen, because then it will allow them to compete in the environment that they want to compete in, one that isn't destroying nature and the one that doesn't mean they have to, or they feel like they have to destroy nature in order to progress. Yes, that was also something that I could see coming up in the comments as well, about getting communities involved to spark the interest of political leaders, and that is absolutely right. That's a really good point coming in there. So yes, just very quickly, I know that Jojo's video has stopped, but hopefully it will unfreeze in a moment and we'll have her back, which will be great. But I'm really glad that we can hear her, because that is fantastic. But yes, do support the campaign. Visit stopecocide.earth. There are approaching, I think, 20,000 Earth protectors now. Become one of them, or at least sign the petition and start supporting the campaign and talking about it. We spend a lot of time, right, thinking about what are the most effective things we can do to try and change the world for the better. This is one of the most effective things, if not maybe the most effective thing. I don't know. It's definitely up there in the most effective things we can possibly do. And it's not too difficult for us to lend this our support. Jojo is on the front line, and I kind of feel like the glitchiness of her internet is lending itself to the fact that she's like on the front line of this amazing feat that she's in the midst of making happen for the benefit of all of us. So yes, I'm sorry for those who are struggling to hear and see. Just to remind anyone who's joining late, it's not Jojo's fault at all. It's the rural internet of Gloucestershire and everyone coming home and presumably logging on to watch this, which is ironic. Anyway, right, what I'm going to do quickly is show a video, which is the kind of a summary video about the Ecocide campaign. It's about 2 or 3 minutes long. Once it's finished, we will go to questions. So think of any questions that you'd like to ask. And yeah, we'll go from there. So here we go.
Can you imagine campaigning for human rights or social justice if mass murder and torture were legally permitted? It would be pretty difficult, right? If you're campaigning for environmental justice, climate justice, or the rights of nature, or if you're working in conservation at any level, this is exactly the problem you have. Because serious harm to nature is permitted. Destroying ecosystems right now is not a crime. At the time of recording this, during the COVID-19 pandemic, many polluting activities are on pause. But as the UN's Environment Chief has pointed out, nature has issued a warning. Pandemics could become more frequent if we return to destructive business as usual, because commercial exploitation and destruction of natural habitats and ecosystems upsets nature's balance. Indeed, The climate and ecological crisis already unfolding is the direct result of such disturbance and damage, sustained over decades. It is therefore imperative that we seize this moment to adjust our baseline rules, our laws, to temper corporate behaviour towards nature in order to preserve and nurture life. There is no baseline rule that prohibits serious harm to nature, harm that has brought us to the brink we now stand on. There's a key piece of the jigsaw that is missing. A crime that is happening all around us and described in many different ways, but which has yet to be clearly named, even by many who confront it regularly. That crime is ecocide. Just imagine how much easier it would be to protect what we love and what supports life, from honeybees to chimpanzees, from rivers to rainforests, from fertile soil to living oceans, from food resilience to land stewardship, if it were a crime to destroy ecosystems. It would make all the difference. Even just using the term ecocide makes a difference. It highlights the agency that humans and especially corporations have. We are suffering a biodiversity crisis and ultimately a climate crisis because ecocide has been committed over decades. It should be a crime. And that's what we campaign for. Making ecocide an international crime. That's it. That's what we do. Ours is the only global campaign dedicated specifically to that. Most people don't even know it's possible, let alone that we're partway there. We're already working with international criminal lawyers to take this forward. We're already working with vulnerable states which are starting to call for it on the global stage. And when we succeed, everybody wins. Every campaign for every threatened species, every indigenous group fighting for ancestral lands and forests, every country struggling with toxic extractive industry, every ordinary human being wanting to leave a livable earth to their children. It all gets easier. It all starts to become possible. Making ecocide a crime really can change everything. So, consider supporting our work as part of what you do. Ecocide law is an essential offering to the discussion of how we avoid returning to destructive business as usual, as and when this pandemic is over. This is no longer just an idea whose time has come. It's the key missing piece to create a livable world. Join our public campaign at stopecocide.earth and sign up as an Earth Protector to help fund this vital work. Thank you.
So, I'm afraid we've lost Jojo's video in the meantime, but it's great to see some of the really positive comments coming through from people saying it's so heartening to know that there are means by which we can combat these problems and how inspiring this is. And I can see that someone out there is saying that we should all be signing this petition and supporting this kind of thing, and you are exactly right. Okay, so a few questions well, one of them is why did you start doing this? How did your life before all of this bring you to what you're doing now?
Okay, so I guess I've always had a kind of environmental leaning, in the sense that my mother is actually a songwriter and a poet, and her inspiration has always been nature, and she's a real naturalist and brought us up to learn the names of flowers and plants and all of this. And then she was terribly disappointed when I went off to be a city girl for many years. But when I moved back to this area in Gloucestershire, which is where I grew up with my children, I became much more active on the environmental campaigning side of things. And that was because I discovered fracking. I discovered that hydraulic fracturing, or fracking, was going to be coming to the UK, having established itself in America. And I read up about it and was really shocked at the level of toxicity, the level of risk to ecosystems and communities that it involved. And I was talking about it to my friends and family, and my little daughter, who was then 5, burst into tears, and she said, "Mummy, I don't understand. If they're poisoning the ground, surely they know they're going to poison themselves too. Can't we call them? And can you call them and tell them to stop?" And I said, I didn't think I would be able to get them to stop just by making a phone call. And she said, well, what can you do? Who can you talk to? And we'd just been to the local elections. She'd been to the ballot box with me. And she said, can you talk to the voting man? And I found myself in front of our local Tory MP talking about fracking. And he dodged every question I asked and kind of slipped around everything I said. And I came out of that meeting thinking, that is never going to happen again. I'm going to inform myself and I'm going to make sure something happens about this. And so I became very actively involved in the on-the-ground anti-fracking movement in the UK. So I became a very active on-the-ground campaigner. And it was through that work and the research I did around it that I met Polly Higgins back in 2014, who had already been crusading about ecocide crime for several years. And I think it was very much a kindred spirit moment. We really kind of recognised each other and each other's way of working. And we worked very closely together for the last few years of her life. And I guess I ended up literally inheriting this campaign with, by then, several years of in-depth knowledge of the subject. So that's how I ended up doing what I'm doing.
Wow. Okay, other people are saying wow as well. Someone's saying children see things in a simple way, and usually and often the simplest of things is the right answer. Yes, we call that in science, we call that Occam's razor. The idea that the simplest explanation is often the right one. Okay, another question. What is about green growth? Do you think green growth is possible? Sorry, I know this is a little bit off ecocide law, but maybe that isn't one you want to answer. But up to
no,
you.
it's. I completely understand why it's being asked. And you know, people are often afraid of what might happen if the way that we conduct our economy had to change. And there is a debate around whether it's possible to have green growth or whether you actually have to kind of degrow. There's a whole degrowth movement. I would say that there's, the person who I think has the most interesting and pertinent comments on that at the moment is Kate Raworth in her book Donut Economics, which I would to looking at economics, where she looks at, growth as something that shouldn't be seen as a goal in itself. And I think this is probably one of the biggest obstacles that we encounter in our campaign, which is why it is very relevant, because a lot of Treasury people in different governments are still thinking in terms of GDP growth being a measure of success. And actually, reality is that it's not possible to continue sort of, physically growing the economy on a finite planet. It just doesn't work. I mean, in the same way as if you keep walking west, you realize the world is round. If you keep extracting from a planet that has finite resources, you're going to rather quickly realize that you're cutting off the branch you're sitting on. We tend to think of the sort of growth model per se as being outdated and totally unrealistic. However, there are some countries grow their economies in order to kind of, to sort of move forward, whereas the bigger economies need to stop growing and stabilize. That it's sort of different in different places, but the green growth side becomes important in that context because, there are countries that can potentially leapfrog some of the horribly polluting ways that, we, for example, in the UK have come to where we are now. I mean, I'm thinking, for example, of the rather brilliant project in Bangladesh. I actually can't recall the name of the company that started it at the moment, but it's about solar power generation at a community level, where it's at community level that can then be distributed to a local grid. And, you're basically completely skipping the whole, that we've gone through here, which is so polluting. You're skipping straight to a model that can actually work and that's actually community sort of grassroots up. So I think that there is in some ways there are green growth possibilities that are just phenomenal, that are just waiting to happen, and that can be done without polluting. But there are also economies such as the large economies that cannot afford to keep growing because the answer to that, but I do think it is very relevant.
Yes, I mean a lot of the growth the growth mechanism at the moment is mainly just based on continued extraction of resources. As long as we grow, we use more of them. It's something that George Monbiot is like very opposed to the idea that green growth can be possible at all. But I guess that in theory, it is possible for an economy to grow in terms of like creating new technologies that don't necessarily use more resources, but create more kind of create more like convenience for people, or create more food for people more efficiently and with less damage to the ground. So in theory, it's possible, but in practice, it's a very, very difficult thing to happen at the moment, which is, George Monbiot has written some great stuff about that. So Poppy Flint is asking, will the Ecocide law, this is a really good question, will the Ecocide law allow developments to be able to be stopped based on the precautionary principle? So if a development might happen, and in doing so it might cause ecocide, might that be able to stop these developments from happening in the first place?
Yes, I think that's absolutely the whole point of what we're doing, in the sense that one of the most common questions we get is, which are the CEOs or which are the bad boys that you want to see in the dock? And actually, the reality is we don't want to see anyone in the dock. What we want to see, is it going to create ecocide? And if it's going to create ecocide, am I going to end up behind bars? Oh no! In that case, I better do it a different way. So that's actually what we're aiming for. We're aiming for a deterrent. We're not being deterrent, if you like. We're not ultimately wanting to, create a whole bunch of criminals to get prosecuted. We're wanting to create a situation where the practices change and you actually stop the harm. Really important. I mean, it's brilliant that people are being taken to court for climate crimes, if you like, or for and for sort of negligence and all these other kinds of cases that are going on. They're really important in terms of evidence creation. They're really important stopping the harm. A litigation case is a bit like saying, well, you can carry on beating this woman up so long as you pay her first, or so long as you pay her for the bruises you've already given her. We're not interested in that. We're interested in stopping the harmful practices. So yeah, absolutely.
And Jane's kind of given a follow-up question to that, which is what about retrospective prosecutions of ecocide, so people being prosecuted for crimes they committed in the past? What are your views on that? And also another question that fits well with this is, what will happen when ecocide is recognised as a crime? What do you think will be the most immediate changes?
Okay, so actually, if you think about it, that would really mess with the rule of law. So you couldn't just otherwise you could end up with, I don't know, some horrible fascist government that says this is now a crime, and it's a crime in the last 20 years as well. No, you can't do that. So crime doesn't work like that. So no, you wouldn't have retroactive criminality. But there's a very good reason why that's a good thing, and I'll tell you why it's a good thing. Because effectively, when you put in motion the process to amend that international law, just the fact that someone's, in fact, is in a way it's at a level, but as soon as that is actually proposed, you're setting in motion a sort of procedural train of events that will ultimately lead to the criminalisation of ecocide. And at the point it's criminalised is when it will become punishable. So what you're doing by doing that is you're creating a compliance period. You're effectively saying to CEOs and government ministers and insurers and you go further back in the production chain, so the people who are going to be the first ones to see, oh my gosh, this is coming. It may not be here now, but it's coming down the line. And in a few years' time, we won't be able to do this anymore. And that's where you're going to see the change in course. So you're going to see the people steering in a different direction, because there is a period after which they can no longer do what they're currently doing. So actually, the fact that criminal law is not retrospective is actually really important. It makes the transition possible. And I've now forgotten the second question. So
the other question was, what do you think will happen most immediately? But actually, you've kind of answered that in that we'll have this like transition period when companies suddenly start getting on board even before it's a crime. but then the moment it becomes a crime, I guess, because it's a long process. I think you did actually answer that question really nicely. Unless you'd like to add more.
No, I think you're right. I think that pretty much was incorporated in the previous answer.
Yeah. So another one is which countries are the kind of main friction, or which people are the main friction slowing this down?
Okay, that's an interesting one, and we do often get asked, who is it that gets in the way? Obviously, I mean, America has currently got, and certainly until, a new government don't like international law messing with their sovereignty. So, that they're not particularly on board. But actually, weirdly, it doesn't really matter because they're not a member of the International Criminal Court, so they can't actually stop it happening. And even if they were a member, they couldn't stop it happening unless they managed to get 80 other countries to agree with them. And frankly, right now, I can't see 80 countries agreeing with America, at least not on that point. So, no, the fact is with the International Criminal Court is it's a one state, one vote situation, which is like the UN, but unlike the UN, there isn't a Security Council that can veto anything. So effectively, once this is on the table, it is on the table. It can't be taken, it's just a question of accumulating support. And that's one of the really exciting things about the route that we're taking. So although there are probably countries that wouldn't necessarily embrace this with open arms, they're not, it's really about gathering the support for the people that do want to take it forward. Because you don't actually need all of the big economies for it to move forward and actually become a crime on that statute. And the exciting thing about it is that once it is on the statute, even for countries that are not even members of the International Criminal Court, it still has an effect. Because if you think about it, actually, this is where we come into something called a universal jurisdiction, which is a kind of principle, a legal principle that can be operated by individual nations. So let's say an American company is committing ecocide in, Venezuela, but they have a main office in Brussels, and Belgium ratifies this crime, then they can prosecute that CEO in Belgium to engage in legal proceedings and prosecutions in countries that are different to the country where the crime is happening and that are different to the country where the perpetrator originates. So long as they set foot in a country that has the jurisdiction, they can be prosecuted. And there's an example of that in the UK. They was arrested in the UK. And, his claim was, look, Chile's not signed up to this law, so you can't arrest me. But the UK Supreme Court said, well, actually, we're signed up to it, you're on our territory, and so we're going to arrest you. So it's kind of interesting. It allows for the marginalization, which haven't ratified the crime. And to go back to your original question of, who gets in the way, it's actually not so much the individuals, and it's not, as I just explained, it's not necessarily individual countries. It's more about the mindset, which is what Asia, or the mindset of GDP growth. It's more to do with people getting their heads around that. And what's interesting is that the science is all already on our side. As Greta Thunberg is constantly pointing out, the best, latest science is telling us this. How long is it going to be before the politicians catch up? And actually, that's, what we're finding is, in fact, it's the political will, it's the political arena which is lagging behind, both popular opinion to a large extent, but also the science of what's going on. So it's really a question of education, but not just education. It comes back again to that conversation side of things that I was talking about before, and the narrative and expanding the narrative. When politicians are hearing from right, left and centre, what is this ecocide thing? How can you be allowing this to happen? Something's got to be done. That's where the change is going to happen.
This feels like a very good place to stop. This idea that the politicians are going to catch up and the public support is there, and this amazing concept that it doesn't even need all countries to be supporting it, and as long as companies have offices in countries that are supporting it and they step foot in those countries, then they can still be prosecuted, and that the very process itself is going to marginalize those who don't want to support it. It seems like it's one of the best chances that we have of turning the chaos that's going on in the world around. So I can see that Jojo's just frozen, so I'm just going to come off frozen for a moment and go to here and say thank you very much for coming to this lesson. And do support Jojo's campaign in any way that you can, and spread the word. Word of mouth multiplies very quickly, and there is no time to lose. As you know from what I've said before, in my opinion, there are very few things in the world more worthy of our support than making ecocide an international crime. So please do follow the Ecocide campaign. Go to stopecocide.earth or at Ecocide Law as well. And otherwise, please do tell your friends, family and colleagues about our Nature First, curiosity powered online school and our mission to make world-class live learning accessible for all. And please do rate and review us on Trustpilot if you haven't already. That would be great. And if you haven't already decided to come to the other parts of the Fortnight of Inspiration, then don't miss tomorrow with the incredible Sam Lee, folk musician, activist, and a great inspiration of mine over the years. And don't miss next week as well. You can join Sally Earthral, who is a leader of multiple all-female sailing voyages with Expedition, with double X, traveling all over the world to research plastic pollution and educate everyone about it too. And finally, at the end of next week, there's a chance to get up close and personal with some insects and mollusks with Zoo Lab, which will be really cool. And yeah, if you'd like to donate or become a patron of Aim High to support our ability to keep running fantastic learning experiences for free like this one, and distributing our recordings to refugee camps and more, then you can support us via Patreon, which you can find at the bottom of our website, and the web address is maybe on this somewhere around here. And yeah, we're also about to launch Aim High Tutoring, connecting learners with top tutors for the price of a cup of coffee. So do check that out as well. And yeah, do follow our socials, and do also join the Aim High community mailing list, again at the bottom of our website if you haven't already. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you to Jojo for being here. I'm going to go back to Jojo now. I was hoping that she'd have unfrozen so that she could say a quick goodbye unfrozen. Jojo, could you try turning on and off with video, and let's see if we can get you unfrozen to say goodbye. Oh no, we've just got a blank space. Oh no, this is a shame. Well, anyway, we can have an audio goodbye. Goodbye, Jojo. Thanks for coming.
You absolutely can. That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Matthew. And speak again at some point soon.
Thank you so much, all. We will see you again for the next bit of the Fortnight of Inspiration tomorrow. Goodbye.